So today we are doing unit 1, which is a preparatory human resources management work. So this unit has just 2 outcomes, which we will shortly talk about. So we have the learning outcome 1, which is to discuss the essentials of human resources management, where we talk about the definitions and functions. And then we look at the second learning outcome, which is examining the role of strategizing, designing, and planning in HRM, or human resources management. I think if we are to move, our point of departure should be then to define what human resources management is in the South African context. And what I did, I just went through different definitions. But I think for me, the one that stands out was the one that says that HRM is about the development and application of policies, systems, practices, and procedures that combine the efforts of people in the organization towards the kind of performance that supports the vision and short and long-term objectives of the organization. And then it goes on to say, while at the same time satisfying the personal and social needs of its members. I think when we look at the next slide, we'll see how this comes to life, because this basically says we would need systems in place, we would need documents in place or policies in place that would enhance or push the efforts of the people towards meeting objectives of the organization. But while doing this, while meeting the needs of the organization, people are not ignored. So that's what basically HRM is. And part of understanding what HRM is that it's also the functional area that manages all the issues pertaining to the people in the business, meaning the employees, how they are employed, how they survive in the workplace, from before they are recruited, right down to when they are employed, when they are trained, when they get paid, when they are injured. All of that is part of what HRM is about. The last definition is that HRM is a strategic approach to effective people management, because if you are to have a successful organization that meets its needs, be it objectives, be it its goals, be it its vision and mission, you would need an approach on how to manage people in such a way that they remain members of the organization, manage them in such a way that they are committed to the organization, and manage them in such a way that they would want to give their most to the organization, while obviously they are gaining something, also the organization would gain something. So the approach to do that is called the human resources approach. This stems from the fact that if we look at the history of what is called human resources approach, it wasn't always human resources approach. It was at some point human relations approach. At some point, it was called scientific management, where the focus was on the work being done. At some point, there were thoughts that if working conditions are okay, then the person should be okay. But the HR approach, or the human resources approach, sort of now communicates differently, because it's pushing for the employee benefiting, and while the organization benefits as well. So basically, the HR approach, what it does, it believes that the organizational goals and the human needs are or should be compatible. So what the employee needs and what the organization needs should not be in conflict. Because if you look at the circle here, it says here, high employee motivation and applied ability would lead to the quality of the work and the quantity of the work output being okay, which would lead to the business being productive and profits being gained, which would lead to recognition and rewards given to the employee. So basically, this approach just states that you shouldn't prioritize the organization at the expense of the employee, while you still don't prioritize the employee at the expense of the organization. So basically, the HR approach that states that organization will benefit if the employee is satisfied, because a satisfied employee would be an engaged employee. And if they're engaged and they're satisfied, then they would work better. And if they work better, profits would come, and in turn, um, profit would be received, and these profits would lead to rewards that the same employee would be privy to, or to benefit from. So that is basically the HR approach. So there's a couple of functions that human resources actually does, and this is a summary. If you go into your study guide, you will find that there are many that I mentioned, and this is my own grouping of what HR actually does. What are its functions? First one, I had said it's hiring. This includes planning what skills you need, recruiting those skills, there's selection after recruitment, and then inducting them, meaning orientating them into the organization. Part of what a human resources management needs to do is manage performance. This is basically where we set the goals together, set the objectives together, and measure them at the end to say, this is what we had promised each other, and this you do quarterly or even annually to see where the employee would be needed. Part of talent development includes career development, where right at the entry of the person's career, we sit down and we talk to each other to say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Which growth path would you look to, or look at, and what courses do you need to take, or what training would you need to take to get there? Because at the end of the day, what human resources wants to achieve is employee retention. Employee retention is basically keeping the employees at work. Because if you are not keeping them at work, it means they're leaving. And the moment they leave, it means you need to come back here again. And this is costly for the organization. Also, human resources management is concerned with remuneration, which means the salaries of people and including the benefits that are there. These, if done properly, they lead to this also. And then from the previous slide, you see that if this is if people are satisfied, they would give they would be productive. If production is there, then profits would come. From the profits, it is then that you decide to reward employees for the efforts that they put in. These rewards must be such that they are sustainable and they are of value to the employee, because what you give to an entry level employee is not what an employee that has been there for a while would see as valuable. So you need to decide as HR, what is it that you would really want? HR is concerned with safety. Part of the functions of human resources management is to ensure that the employees are safe at work and the environment is healthy in terms of wellness, in terms of the environment being physically safe. And I think nowadays we all understand that mental health is very key. And HR just needs to ensure that people are able to open up, people have a space to be healthy. And the last one is the function of labor relations. This is concerned with understanding laws, which is legislations, and maintaining peace between the employer and the employee and the employer. because if there's no peace and harmony, then it means that strikes and work will stop. So all the time, labor relations needs to ensure that work is always going on all the time. So as we've just mentioned, that your HR, part of the functions that it needs to do is to understand legislations. So human resources management is affected by many different legislations or laws. And I think these ones, actually, I don't think these ones are the main ones that are concerned with the human resources management. So what you would find in HRM is that these acts here govern the life of an employee in HRM. So we have the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, which is an act that regulates labor practices such as the conditions of employment, your working hours, your leaves, your notice period. So this act, it just stipulates minimum acceptable conditions. So it would say, for example, how many hours an employee should work. And if those are exceeded, when does it become overtime? How much leave is a person supposed to get? When is break supposed to be taken? How much notice do you need to give when leaving? That's the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. And then you have the Labor Relations Act. So the Labor Relations Act basically is the one that ensures that there's labor peace and harmony and social justice. This is it gives it gives effect to employees and their unions just to ensure that these people are able to express their rights in the form of trade unions, and it also affords what is called collective bargaining, where both the employers and employees come together to decide on their sectoral conditions, because what works for manufacturing sector does not work for agricultural sector. So both the employers here and the trade unions here come together and develop what is called employee and collective agreements. Those collective agreements would have minimum conditions that work for that particular sector. So here you also find the CCMA, which is the Commission for Conciliation, Mediation and Arbitration. It's developed in terms of this act, and basically this act would want to promote employee participation in the decision making and just ensure that where there are disputes, these are handled quickly and without any prejudice. You have the Employment Equity Act, which came about in 1998. This act is basically there to ensure that there is no discrimination against people who had been previously disadvantaged. So this one, it just simply says all employers must have what is called the employment equity plan, where you would need to state on the plan what are the demographics in the workplace? How many Africans, how many coloreds, how many females, how many disabled people? And it says that there is something called fair discrimination. And this fair discrimination, it implements through what is called affirmative action. Affirmative action just simply says you could overlook some people based on the previously disadvantaged status of others. So if there's two people vying for the same position and they both qualify the same way with the same experience, the first choice will be the one who's previously disadvantaged. Could be a black female, could be a white female, could people living with disabilities. So different discriminations there could be allowed, because what you're trying to do is redress the imbalances of the past. You have the Occupational Health and Safety Act, OHSA, and this act basically looks at providing that health and safety environment in the workplace. where it dictates clearly the machinery use, it dictates the fines that people could get, the different hazards that are there, and it even provides for an advisory council where this advisory council says who could be fined, who could not be fined for not adhering to the health and safety regulations. And the last one is the Skills Development Act. This one addresses training needs of South African workers, just simply says everyone has a right to lifelong learning and everyone must be developed. So this one requires the employers to make sure that there's continuous learning and there's continuous training of the workforce. It even seeks from the employers what is called a workplace skills plan and continuous and annual training reports to say who have you trained and what have you trained them on as a priority of government and the state in trying to develop the employees in South Africa. So the, there's many more that are not mentioned here. I could mention the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act called COIDA. I could mention the Skills Development Levies Act, which works with this one for monies to be paid towards the Skills Fund. And I could mention Unemployment Insurance Fund. All of those work towards or regulate the employment in South Africa. And obviously the custodians are the human resources management practitioners and employees. Right. Now, one thing about human resources management is that it does not exist within a vacuum, meaning it's just not just in the air. It actually exists within a particular environment. And that environment it would be not the external, but within the organization. The organization would have a mission, a vision, it would have a mission, it would have different objectives. Now, there are the expectations from the human resources management with each decided strategy by the organization. Now, what you see here are different strategies that an organization could decide on choosing. Whether defense it chooses to be or it chooses the defender strategy, where organization would say we would want to remain with our market share. We don't want to grow, we don't want to do anything, we just want to maintain. So HRM would have to do something in terms of training and development, in terms of recruiting, in terms of career development, in terms of labor relations. It would have to do something, because if we're talking about protecting the current market share, it means employees need to do exactly as they are doing. Chances are you might need to make sure they are rewarded properly. Chances are you might need to make sure they are skilled properly, just to make sure you don't lose anyone and there are no strikes. So HRM would have to do something. If um, the organization chooses to expand or grow, where they would want to gain a share in the market or gain or bring in more profit, it might mean you need to plan for the future skills that you would need in the future. How many people, how many skills, which positions. You might need to decide, is the structure extending? What would also, if you are growing, means you might bring in technology. So what skills would be needed in terms of training and development? So HRM would be developed with what is happening here. And then cost cutting. For cost cutting, if the organization is reducing costs and expenditure, one area that will be affected is the employees. So these employees would then lose their employment. Could be in terms of in terms of what do you call retrenchments. It could be short hours. If there are short hours, then it means people might do something else like training. It means people might work less. This could mean a lot. It could mean the labor relations also could be affected in terms of strikes, in terms of people wanting to leave the organization, in terms of planning. Instead of you hiring from outside, you might need to transfer, close down some departments, merge some departments. This is what HRM would need to do. If the organization decides to differentiate where it wants to stand out with its own brand, be a brand that is specializes in its own. I think a brand that comes to mind is Rolls-Royce as a car. This means something for HRM. New training, new specialized people that you would need to recruit outside your normal recruitment. Your pay systems would need to change. In terms of remuneration and rewards, you might need to offer them specialized fees or specialized money. So this would definitely mean HRM is affected, and HRM that works is one that is aligned to the strategy of the organization. Right. One of the other things that we had said HRM does is to develop policies. Now, there are areas of where these policies would work. You develop these policies to influence employees. Policies such as your code of conduct, where you are clear on what is done, what should not be done, and what will happen if something bad has happened. In terms of compensation, what monies are due to you when you have done, say, overtime. There needs to be a policy for this. A policy would be a guideline. Working conditions, what types of leaves are there and how are these regulated? You need a policy for study leave. You need a policy for sick leave, which will tell you when can you take these and when can you not take these. You have policies on personnel flow. Oh, there's leave there. I think it could also fit in there. Transfers, how do you apply for a transfer? Discipline also matches that there. And grievances, how do you complain? Who do you complain to? How long does a complaint take? If you're not satisfied, where do you go? Such would be such a leave. And then reward systems like this one here. When do you get rewarded? How do you get rewarded? Is it always monetary? Are there awards that you've received? How do you qualify to share, to get shares in the business? And then how often would you sit in a review? And this review, who sits on them? How much time does it take and how frequent these are? And then you'd have policies on work systems. How often are you going to rotate? Who is going after who in terms of succession? If there's an elderly or senior employee who's going to retire, there should be a succession planning saying who's going to fit and when they are going to fit. So we have what you call the HR process. So the HR process is basically the HR process, planning process is basically one of the functions, because if human resources wants to be strategic, then it means they must plan ahead, and planning ahead certainly means then you must understand what needs to happen. And part of what needs to happen is you focusing labor demand, meaning estimating the number of workers that are needed by the business in the future. And then also you focused where would you find these? What are the skills that you'd need from this? And then also you would keep inventories where you know which skills do you have, how many skills do you have, where you'd find these. And then from there, you implement when these are going to be used, and then you check if there are any deviations from your planning. So that's basically it for today's class. I just wanted to speak on those. I think though I was missing a slide, or maybe it's a different class. Um, Actually, that was going to speak on the HR trends, which is something which I think I'll slot in to the next class. I will share the slides on to my YouTube channel and then share the link with you. I will now stop sharing and stop recording, and then just allow for any questions if you have any. Thank you.